Welcome everybody to this month's monthly roundup. This month we're doing the third in the series of leadership pitfalls. So we've talked about power, we've talked about money, and this month is on sex. As you can see, we're only 3 people. I tried to get a 4th person to come on with us, and a lot of people said no. I think everybody's not really wanting to talk about sex. Yeah, we're here to share a little bit about what we've learned this month out of the resources. So with us, I've got Ton, and he's in the Netherlands. He works with excelling leaders. We've also got Debbie, who's originally from Nigeria, but she is in Burtigny. And Debbie is actually going to be helping me to host these monthly roundups. So from now on, you'll see her as coming on as the host. So look out for that. And in fact, Debbie, you were the one that had some really good ideas about Landa's the lounge, the leadership lounge. So maybe you can share a little bit of your insights from that.
Yeah, so Landa's talk stuck with me a lot. I think one of the things that she said that really stood out was to not be naive of our capacity to fall into the pitfalls of sexual sin or challenges, and to be aware that that is something that happens to us all, even in our mission. She talked a lot about how it's really important for us as a mission to speak clearly about this issue because of the nature of who we are. We're diverse, we come from different cultures, different denominations, different personal beliefs and preferences, and that makes it really easy to have a multiplicity of views about what sexuality is. But I really loved how she gave an example of what she did when she was back here in Brittany, actually setting a context for when people come into our center or our community, that we have a clear way of communicating where we stand and how we engage with these struggles. And so, yeah, that really stuck with me, to pay attention to the fact that me, you, everybody can fall into this challenges or face these pitfalls, and to be aware and alert to engage in a way that cultivates a lifestyle of holiness and purity, so that we don't just say, oh, I'm a Christian, I'm part of YWAM, I'm good to go. Yeah, so that really stood out from Landa's content.
Oh, that's really, really true. I mean, I think if we don't, we're not upfront about it, if we're not talking about it, you know, it's something that can be used against us as a mission. And so many people, it kind of becomes this shameful thing. And in shame is when the devil can really get a foothold. So, you know, it's really, that was one good thing that really came out of Landa's, was to be upfront, and we need to be clear in communicating about it. So, and I think also, Ton, you saw in the drop-in discussion that one of the things that came out was we need to be talking more about sex and sexuality. And yeah, so maybe you can share a little bit about that and other things that you've picked up from this month.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Yeah, what stood out for Landa was really like, if we don't hear about it as leadership, if we think people are not struggling because we don't hear, there must be something going on. Mm. There must be issues because so many people wrestle with this topic. So yeah, we need to discuss this much more. And also in the drop-in discussion, we talked about, yeah, it was about, we need to talk about it. But also in the drop-in discussion, it was about, we need to learn to build really deep connections in YWAM. We so often travel a lot, we move from base to base, it's all short term. So we really need to be aware that we need to build on good deep connections. And when we travel, if we travel alone, how do we protect ourselves? So how do we look at the structures of YWAM and the pitfalls that come out of that structure? What I also liked is that we need to learn about good pleasure. Just do good things, not only good pleasure in sexuality. I mean, we talk about it so often in a negative way, connected to shame and sin. That's not how God intended it to be. But it's also about good pleasure for singles, good joy, and even Kari also shared in the drop-in discussion as a sex therapist. He said, hey, we need to be aware of how we manage our adrenaline in our bodies, and that can help so much. Yeah. Also, can we talk about, can we really address one another when we're too busy? Can we say, hey, you need to go home? Your marriage is your first ministry. Do you have you had your Sabbath? So yeah, that were some of the things that stood out for me in the drop-in discussion.
Mm. Yeah, and you also had some things that struck you from Johan's talk. Maybe you can share some of those.
Yeah, well, I think Johan's talk is a very good movie to watch. Very clearly says temptation. We need to talk about temptations. Temptation is not a sin in itself, but that's where the battle starts. So we need to be aware of that spiritual battle. Yeah, he also said that if we don't talk because we feel ashamed, we get disconnected from each other. And I think that's also what Linda stretched, that at the fall we also got to distrust one another. And got disconnected from one another. And talking about sexuality, it's such an issue because we feel like we can be condemned. And then in the drop-in discussion, it also was, where do you go as leaders? Can you talk without condemnation, without losing trust? And so many leaders are really alone, wrestling with it.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. I think one of the Billy Graham actually set up for himself a group of fellow leaders that it wasn't just about sexual sin, but any of the pitfalls that they could ask him about. And I think that sometimes we kind of see accountability as a sort of bad word, or a 4-letter word sometimes, but having a group of peers or people that you can talk to about anything is so important as leaders. Otherwise, you do get to feel alone. And if something does happen, then you've got no one to go to. So I think that's the key. And I think in Eric Dementa, I think it's Demeter, I can't pronounce his surname properly. He talked about, that's the main thing, is actually being able to confess your struggles to someone and have that accountability. And that sharing with someone else, if you are struggling, is that first step to freedom. And I think that's so important to remember, that actually we as leaders, we need to be able to share with someone, but we also need to be the kind of leader that will help people who are struggling if they need to share with us, and not condemn them straight away. Yeah, and I think with Anke Thyssen, like, that was such a great article. I kind of want to take it, print it out and frame it. It's how to restore people, and it's something we as leaders, we all need to know how to do properly. It's such a great article. So, and that was one of the things as well, like in every situation of moral failure, this is what she said, love should pervade and truth prevail. So I think when someone needs to be restored, like, there's so much that goes on, and that's the key, is that love needs to be the thing that brings it all together. And we as leaders, we need to learn how to do that properly, so that people can feel that they can come to us and share. Yeah, Debbie, you had some more things about Johan's talk as well, that were interesting to you.
Yes, I found it interesting that he talked about what the consumption habit was after
Have we lost you, Debbie?
do we consume in terms of music, in terms of entertainment? Like, now you can have, there's Netflix, there's a gazillion ways you can consume different materials for entertainment. Like, what are we aware of what we're taking in? Because that also matters. And so I was sharing with you guys a little bit earlier, like I started watching a show which was released last year, and it's super funny and well made. And it's actually a PG show, but and there's no explicit sexual content on there. But if you like taking a step back and kind of saying, okay, what is going on here? Like, what is the narrative or the worldview that this show is communicating? You see that it's all connected to sexuality and kind of how we engage with it. And that connects to something Lander said that also stuck with me about being aware of your conscience and listening to the Holy Spirit, because sometimes it's very personal, because what I can consume would be different from the next person. And so she was talking about how that nudge, or if you're gonna watch something or listen to something, you have that kind of feeling or nudge from your conscience to really pay attention to that. And I thought, yeah, in this case for me, it's not the show, and I'm not going to say the show because I think it's really cool, so other people could watch it. It's not that this is such a terrible show and like nobody should watch it, but for me personally, I thought, okay, this is not very healthy. I just had that nudge to just let it go, and it's like, okay, that's a way of paying attention to what I consume, because that ultimately influences the way we see the world, what we're okay with, what we're not okay with. And so I thought that was really cool what he was sharing about him paying attention also to what he consumed.
That's so good. That's so good. It's interesting. I've actually been reading a book about so one of my issues, don't necessarily have an issue with sexual stuff, but is with consumption and eating too much. And so I was reading a book about that, and actually it's almost exactly like sexual sin and gluttony are, they kind of are on the same sort of page. And I one of the things that the author was saying was that, God made us to crave. He made us to crave him. And if we're not filling our hearts and our minds and our thoughts and our soul with the Bible and with, good worship and with good fellowship, and, we're going to end up craving that which, we've got that little sort of cell in us to crave. So you might end up craving, in my case, maybe food, or, you crave something, pornography, or, maybe even just something that, that's then becomes an idol in front of God. And one of the things that she suggested, which has been so helpful for me, is every time you feel like that food craving, or like even if you're craving pornography, or, so I think I like the way that Johan called it, unwanted sexual behavior. It's that covers it really all. Is actually it's sort of a spotlight that you need to go back to the Lord, and that you need to spend, take that craving and crave the Lord. So if you're like like you were saying, like you've been prompted now, like, okay, I'm not going to watch that show anymore because the Lord is saying it's not right for me. But then, you can actually spend that time. Okay, I'm going to spend that time instead then, with in the Lord, or with the Bible. I'm not saying like all every day, but there's it's a little prompting to spend time with the Lord when you've got something that's, or pray in that moment. Or so if you're struggling with sexual sin, one of the things is obviously we need to have accountability. But another thing is it is there because we're made to crave, and we're made to crave the Lord. So if you are struggling with it, another thing is to try and, like I think Eric was saying about it, like spend time meditating and spend time, filling yourself up with other things that will then fill that craving, rather than craving those sexual sins and those other things. So I think that's one thing that I would suggest, and I think it's a good pathway. I think there really is, it's different for every person. Like I think Lander was saying, like there's no one way for everybody. You need to find what works for you. And so that's one suggestion I have. There was one one thing that you said earlier, Ton, a little bit more about the sort of spiritual side of things. Can you just maybe share what you're thinking about?
Yeah, so Well, first of all, I am not a person with a perfect background in whole this area. So I had to learn to walk, to do my spiritual battles. But also I know what it is to be restored, and so I want to say there is hope. There is hope. There is. I'm happily married now, and so the article about restoration, that's very, very important. And yes, it's on God's heart to restore people. About the spiritual battle, I think in Europe we sometimes forget to talk about the spiritual battle. We come in the mission field, we think, oh, now I'm in YWAM, now I'm in missions, and everything is fine. But actually, I remember one of my leaders in the past when I started working in a counseling center. And I was so enthusiastic being there, and now I can do all the great things I wanted to do for a long time. And he just said, I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the battlefield.
Oh.
Literally, he said. And I think missions is a battlefield. And I did my DTS in South Africa. Maybe they stress it more, but every time it was like, the devil is a liar. He's after you. And just he is a thief. He wants to kill and destroy us. And we need to be aware that if he can't stop us from missions, he will try to stop us in other ways. So yeah, this is a spiritual battle where not talking about it is shame, but it's also bringing things in the darkness.
That's so good. Now that just reminded me of one thing that Johan was talking about, if you, in his talk, and he repeated it in the drop-in, just about shame. And getting to know more about shame, because it is one of the keys that the devil uses against us. So it's part of the battle to know more and to realize the shame has been taken off us. Like, we don't have any shame. So when you start feeling ashamed, you know that it's the devil, it's not God. I wanted just to mention as well, I actually recommend to people to get some sort of software on their computers. I know one of the guys in the article on married couples, whatever, he was like, oh, I don't have any software because I think it's going to slow my computer down. And I actually would just say the opposite. I would say it's worth putting it on every device you have and having someone you're accountable to that for that, simply, even if you don't have any issues. Because of as leaders, we need to be above reproach. We need to be able to say, look at my device. I have nothing to shame, nothing to be ashamed of. And I know other mission organizations who we're not an organization, we're YWAM, which is more of an organism, mandated. You cannot go on the mission field without some sort of software on your computer. So I kind of feel a bit strongly about that, like that actually it really is a good recommendation to have something. And then you are above reproach. You cannot, no one can say, you can show every device and say this is on there and there's nothing. So that's just a suggestion from my side as well. So does anyone have anything? Debbie, you've got maybe one last thing to say?
Yeah, just to add to what you were saying, because it's about being above reproach, but I think it also goes back to something that stood out to me that Landa was saying, is that you can't be too naive and assume that at any point in your life, you're good to go. And it's that whole, how do I create community around me and accountability around me so that I don't fall into this pitfall? I think that that's something that, as you were talking, that resonates with me. It's like, yeah, don't assume that the devil can't get you or you won't fall into this temptation, or at some point in your life, you've arrived. It's more, okay, what can I do as I continue the journey as a leader to make sure that I either, safeguard my purity or walk of purity, or that I don't fall back into it, or whatever your personal experience is. And I thought that that's really worth encouraging, like you said. So whatever you've got to do, like surround yourself with people and community. If, put something on your computer so that, because I think Johan's.
We lost her again. Is there, Debbie?
that the world is saturated by sexuality and you know, like all the stuff that could lure you away from the kingdom. And so, yeah, just to echo that bit. Did I freeze? I saw you guys.
You did freeze, yeah. Yeah, it's okay. Well, thank you guys. This has been great. I hope everyone out there has enjoyed our conversation. I think I've enjoyed it very much. So, but yeah, you'll see Debbie in the hot seat next month, sharing, doing the monthly roundup on hospitality. So look out for that. Bless you guys. Bye.